So, have you heard of Fyodor Dostoevsky? He's one of those classic Russian writers known for diving deep into why people do the things they do, even when they don't make sense. One of his most famous books is Crime and Punishment. It's an intense story that gets into the head of this guy, Raskolnikov, who's wrestling with huge moral questions. Like, is it ever okay to do something bad if it leads to something good? This book is a big deal because it doesn't just tell a story. It makes you think about justice, guilt, and redemption. Dostoevsky wrote it during a time when Russia was changing and people were questioning old beliefs. Even today, it resonates with anyone who's ever wondered if the ends justify the means. Alright, let me tell you what happens in Crime and Punishment. The main character is Raskolnikov, a young student in St. Petersburg. He's smart but broke and feeling pretty hopeless about his future. He becomes obsessed with this idea. What if some people, like really extraordinary people, are above the law? What if they can break the rules for a greater good? He starts thinking maybe he's one of those people. Then, he hatches a plan to kill this old pawnbroker lady. He thinks she's a parasite, just taking advantage of desperate people. So he actually goes through with it. He kills her with an axe. But then, her innocent half-sister Lizaveta walks in, and he ends up killing her too. After the murder, you'd think Raskolnikov would feel relieved, right? But no, he starts spiraling. He's paranoid, guilty, and constantly on edge, convinced someone's going to figure out what he did. He can't sleep, can't think straight, and he's falling apart. What's interesting is how Raskolnikov starts interacting with other people. There's Sonia, a sweet, religious girl forced into a tough life, who becomes like his conscience. She's really important because she represents compassion and redemption, everything Raskolnikov is missing. Then there's Porfiry, a detective who's playing a bit of a cat-and-mouse game with Raskolnikov. He never directly accuses him, but he knows something's up. Eventually, all this guilt eats away at Raskolnikov, and Sonia convinces him to confess. He goes to the police and admits to the murders, and he's sentenced to a prison camp in Siberia. But here's the thing, it's not just about him being punished. It's more about him starting to understand what he did, realizing he's not above anyone else, and maybe finding some peace. Sonia follows him to Siberia, and even though life is still hard, she helps him see there's a chance for redemption, that he can start over. So, in the end, it's not just about the crime and punishment. It's also about redemption and the possibility of becoming a better person. What makes Crime and Punishment so gripping is how it doesn't just focus on the crime, but on what happens afterward. It's like Dostoevsky is saying, okay, you've done something terrible, now what? How do you live with yourself? After Raskolnikov commits the murders, he's caught in a downward spiral. It's painful to watch because you see how he's tearing himself apart. He's constantly battling between his belief that he's above the moral law and the guilt that's eating him alive. You might think, why doesn't he just shake it off? He thought he was justified, didn't he? But that's where it gets interesting. Deep down, Raskolnikov knows what he did was wrong. He tries to rationalize it, but his conscience won't let him off the hook. There's this constant tug-of-war in his head. Part of him wants to believe he's extraordinary and can make his own rules, and the other part just can't escape guilt. This guilt isn't just a little thing, it's huge. It starts affecting every part of his life. He gets paranoid, thinking everyone is watching him, judging him. His health starts to decline, and he becomes a shadow of the person he used to be. The crime he committed has poisoned him from the inside out. Then there's Sonia. She's pivotal because she represents everything Raskolnikov isn't. Humble, compassionate, with a deep faith. Despite her hardships, she never loses her morality. She's forced into prostitution to support her family, but she maintains a sense of purity. She's a beacon of light in Raskolnikov's dark world. Raskolnikov is drawn to her, though he doesn't fully understand why. There's something about her that pulls him in. She sees through his bravado and accepts him, flaws and all. She's not judging him, but she's also not letting him off the hook. She embodies the idea that no matter how far you've fallen, there's always a chance for redemption. As Raskolnikov's mental state deteriorates, the police, especially Porfiry, start closing in. Porfiry is a clever detective who doesn't rush to arrest Raskolnikov. Instead, he plays mind games, trying to get inside Raskolnikov's head. He knows that sooner or later, Raskolnikov's conscience will crack him wide open. And that's what happens. It's not the evidence that gets him. It's his own guilt that drives him to confess. The confession scene is powerful. Raskolnikov, who's been so conflicted and tormented, finally admits what he's done. It's like a massive weight is lifted off his shoulders. But it's also just the beginning of his punishment. He's sentenced to a penal colony in Siberia, which isn't exactly a fun place to be. But here's where the story takes a turn. In Siberia, Raskolnikov starts to change. It's slow, and he doesn't suddenly become a saint. But he begins to understand the value of life and the importance of human connections. Sonia follows him there. She doesn't abandon him, even after everything he's done. She believes in his potential to change, to find redemption. Through her, Raskolnikov begins to see that redemption isn't something you just take. It's something you earn bit by bit, through your actions and willingness to change. Dostoevsky is saying that no matter how far gone you are, there's always a way back, but you have to want it. You have to work for it. And this is where we get to the heart of crime and punishment. It's not just a story about a crime and its consequences. It's about the human condition, the choices we make, and the paths they lead us down. It's about the idea that we all have the capacity for both good and evil within us, and it's up to us to choose which side we nurture. The lesson here is that no one is beyond redemption. No matter how deep you've sunk, there's always a way to rise back up. But it's not easy, and it's not something that just happens. It requires confronting the darkest parts of yourself, admitting your faults, and being willing to change. It's about finding the strength to seek forgiveness, not just from others, but from yourself. In the end, Raskolnikov's journey isn't just about paying for his crime. It's about understanding that true punishment comes from within. It's realizing that we're all connected, that our actions have consequences for ourselves and others, and that, no matter how lost we feel, there's always hope as long as we're willing to face our demons and seek out the light. So, that's Crime and Punishment in a nutshell. It's a heavy read, but it's incredibly rewarding because it makes you think about life, morality, and what it means to be human. And that's why it's still so relevant today. We might not be living in 19th century Russia, but the questions Dostoevsky raises are universal. They're the kinds of questions that stick with you long after you've turned the last page.